Hey, it's Joe from Home Studio Corner. I want to talk to you today about my trip to Houston, recording a band all in one room, and why bleed doesn't matter.
Something for nothing. Trust somebody who knows.
I totally feel like Mr. Rogers taking off my sweater. Take off our shoe. No, I'm kidding. If you follow me on my Facebook page, which you should follow me on my Facebook page, you may have seen a few posts, a few live streams from Houston, Texas, which is where I spent 3.5 days last week recording a band. I want to tell you a little bit about the how it went, and then share a little bit of a sample. Let's talk through that a little bit. So, one of my VIP members, been a VIP member for a while, has a studio. It's actually a rehearsal space that is also a recording studio. So he owns a business that has a warehouse, and in a big storage area, they turned it into a studio. So it's a really long rectangular room. And that's where his band rehearses. And for years, they've been recording to one of those Roland VS-2480s. Do you remember those? From like the 90s. It's an all-inclusive multi-track recording machine. No computer needed. It's a digital system, which is kind of its own computer. And they've been using that for years. And recently, he got into wanting to use Studio One, which I use, and wanting to use the PreSonus Studio Live console, that one over there, for his studio, and kind of transition away from that 2480. So having got the stuff in his studio, he realized he needed a little bit of help. So he hired me to come out for a few days to set up the studio, to get everything kind of set up and working, get some templates in place and that kind of stuff, get everything routed, but then to also record the band, and then hopefully do some training with him so that I could hand the reins over and then they could do it themselves from here on out. Well, it was a really fun week. Lots of long days doing like the 14-hour day thing, but we managed to get everything set up and working, to record 7 songs and then do a little bit of training at the end. So it was all in all, it was a big success. Real quick, apologies, but I had intentions of documenting the whole thing and turning it into a series of videos of day 1, day 2, day 3. With all the work we had to do and kind of the time crunch we were in, it just didn't happen. So I got to figure that out for these big, long recording days, how to capture more stuff so you get to be a part of it. But I did capture some stuff that I'll show you. So let me talk about the setup and how the whole thing worked. So if you imagine a big, long, rectangular room, on this end of the room was the control room. So there were no additional rooms, no booths, just one big room, okay? On this end of the room was kind of the control room area. Mixer, all the preamps, all the stuff was over here. And then if you go right in the middle of the room was the drum kit. On the other side of the drummer was the bass player. On this side of the drummer was the keyboard player. And then kind of over here was the guitar player, lead singer, who faces the drums. And that's how that's their setup. That's how they rehearse. They've been doing this for a while, so we wanted to just leave it like it is. And the goal was to track almost the full band. Not everyone in the band could be there for the tracking session, but to track at least drums, bass, keys, and guitar together and get as many of the songs recorded as we can. So we got set up, we got sound, we got everything routed, everything was getting into the board, into Studio One. But we're having a problem with headphone mixes. So again, everyone's in the same room. Guitar player is plugged into a guitar amp, which is making sound. Bass player is plugged into a bass amp, and then drums are obviously loud. Keyboards were direct. And the idea was, eventually we'd turn the bass amp off, and they would just hear bass in the headphones. Well, one of the problems we ran into, they have these nice headphones that they all use during rehearsal and we're gonna use for recording. The problem was they were open back headphones. If you're not familiar, there are 2 types of headphones. There's closed back that kind of close over your ears and block out sound, and then there's open back. Open back are great. They sound better, they're more accurate, but they're not good for recording because you hear everything in the room. They don't block out any sound. So if I'm sitting there playing bass, standing next to a drum kit, and the drum kit's wailing away, I'm hearing all of that in my ears because my headphones aren't blocking any of it. And now I'm also trying to hear my bass through the headphones, and it just wasn't gonna work. There was no way to get the headphones loud enough so for him to hear the bass over the drum kit. So rather than going out and buying all new headphones, which would have taken half the day and wouldn't have been very productive, we decided to have the bass player turn his amp on. So originally we were recording direct off of his amp head, and we had the speakers off, and we were just getting a direct sound. It sounded great, but he couldn't hear it. So we said, you know what, flip it on. So we turned on one of his speakers to where he could hear himself, he could hear the drums, he could hear everything, all is well with the world. Guitar player, there was an 11 rack in the studio, but he wanted to play through his amp. Same deal, it's all in one room, there's gonna be bleed, but we said, let's do it, why not? We actually had a few of those drum risers, those big plastic things you see in like live shows to block some of the drum sound. So we just put one of those around the guitar amp to block some of the sound from getting out, and we said, let's do it. The bass amp was probably 10 feet away from the drum kit, facing the drum kit, and we said, yeah, let's just do it. Let's just record it and capture something good. So fast forward to the end of the day, and we had tracked 7 songs, 1 cover, and then 6 originals, and everything was sounding good. Day 2, we came in, just me and James, the lead singer, guitar player, and he did vocals and extra guitars. And then there were a couple of nighttime sessions where we brought in a percussionist who was fantastic, played the congas and some other like auxiliary percussion stuff on a few songs. So good. Something I've not gotten to do much. We put stereo mics on it, and it just sounded great. And then a couple other guitar players came in to play some different lead parts for a few of the different songs. So we were just going at it all day for several days, and we ended up getting everything done that we needed to get done. I was even able to get some rough mixes together to give to the guys before I headed home to Nashville. Now, let me get to the point of this video, the thing that I want to talk about that I think is super important. So I think it was last week, I can't remember, but recently I've come across this idea of people saying, how do you deal with bleed? Meaning, I've got a microphone here and it's picking up something else. Now, usually it's in the context of how do you deal with drum bleed, where the tom mic is picking up everything else. And that's actually not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual bleed of one whole different instrument, such as a guitar amp and a bass amp, into all the microphones we had set up for the drums. Now you may think, and I actually thought this a little bit of, oh, it's gonna be just one big mess of sound, there'll be no separation, there's no way we're gonna get a good mix out of this. Well, guess what? It ain't true. If you go back, and I'll play it for you in just a second, and listen to the individual tracks that we recorded, your brain tells you there's no way the drum kit is gonna sound good, it's gonna have so much guitar and bass in the drum mics. And then there's no way that guitar amp is going to sound good because all the loud drums are going to get in that microphone that we use for the amp, and it's going to mess it up, and there's going to be no way to get a good mix. It's just not true. As it turns out, bleed doesn't matter. Now, in a perfect world, if you could have ISO booths for every amp or everyone go direct, would that be ideal? Maybe. But what if they play better having all the amps in the room the way they're used to playing for years and years, and that gets a better performance? I'll take that recording over a clean, sterile, boring sounding recording any day of the week. That's not to say it will always be sterile if you don't have things bleeding together, but I wanted to show up, get the system working, and then capture them performing their music with minimal interruption, minimal distraction, minimal changes for them, because they don't do a ton of recording. They've been recording to that 2480 for a long time, but I wanted them to just be able to have the freedom to play in an environment that they were used to playing in. And that's what we did. And as it turns out, the recordings are great. So let's just go listen to them. Hang on. Okay. So, got one of the songs pulled up. Let me just play it for you. I'll just let you hear it from the intro to when the band comes in.
I've been walking down the line,
So this is probably one of my favorites that we did. It's just they didn't even use a click on this one. It just has this vibe and this groove and this huge low end. And these are, I think I did I did a little mixing on this, but nothing crazy. And it just feels really good. Now, everything you're hearing, not everything, but that main guitar, keyboards were direct, but guitar, drums, and bass were all recorded at the same time with just bleed all over the place. Let me play you the drums first. Now you'll hear some bleed, but when I drop it back in, you'll notice it just doesn't sound that bad. Here we go. You can barely hear the guitar in the background. I've got it cranked right here. So you can hear the bass in there, you can hear the main guitar, and you can actually hear him singing the scratch vocal while they were recording. They did all that live. They broke all the rules to what you think you should do. But when you drop it back in and everybody comes in, you don't hear any of the bleed. You just hear awesome. Same thing with the guitar. If I solo that, you'll hear the drums back there somewhere. Yeah, on this song, you can't even hear it. On the bigger, heavier songs, you could hear it a little bit, the drums in the background, but it's just not a problem. Now, there are some things that wouldn't have worked. Acoustic guitar probably wouldn't work, so we recorded that later. Keyboards were direct. Bass was direct, but there was bleed from the amp, and it just worked. That's the point, is if you are stalling and hesitating and pontificating about recording something, just stop and go record it today, this weekend. Just go do it and then come back and listen and see what it sounds like, because all these ideas you have about what's right and wrong when it comes to working in the studio, you'll probably blow most of those out of the water and be able to just make music, because that's why we got all this stuff anyway, right? Is to make music, not to do it properly, but to make something that feels good and sounds good. I don't think we would have gotten this cool recording if I had had the drummer play first, then the bass player, then the guitar player, or if I had done a bunch of overdubs, or if everything was super isolated. I think this happened because of the way we set up and recorded. And the way we set up and recorded wasn't my brilliant idea. It was just, okay, these are the limitations we have in front of us. Let's make it work. And we did, and it turned out great. So, two things. If you're interested in having me come out to your studio and do something like this, I'd love to talk to you. I know not everybody can do that. Doesn't make sense for a lot of people, but if you are interested, head over to my contact page and shoot me some information. Give me your phone number. Let's talk about it and see if that's something we can work out. I don't know if it's something I'll continue doing forever, but for now I'm interested because it was really fun and turned out really well. If you're not interested in that and you just want to know how to get better at recording, you definitely need to check out my recording cheat sheet. It's completely free. Go to recordingcheatsheet.com. and you'll be able to access that for free. Just pop in your email address. That'll put you on my email list where you get lots of goodies there. Plus, you'll get the free PDF that'll make you have better recordings by the weekend. So glad to be back in Nashville. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.